Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Day 27 of the war. Israeli forces have surrounded Gaza City. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv. He's calling for a humanitarian pause. It looks like the appeal has fallen on deaf ears. In neighboring Lebanon, thousands turned up to listen to the Hezbollah chief, his first address since the war broke out. So will the Hezbollah join this war? We'll tell you what their chief said. In other news, the Prime Minister of Australia is on a state visit to China. Quite a turnaround from 2 years ago when Australia was calling for a probe into the origins of the Wuhan virus and China was slamming it. The story of Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto king turned convicted scamster. He faces 100 years in jail. Why shared workspace company WeWork did not work. It may file for bankruptcy next week. Why fake weight loss drugs pose a serious danger and why medical science has no cure for obesity. And how the Beatles have released their last song with some help from AI. All these stories and more coming up. The headlines first. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks to the President of the UAE. The two leaders discuss the Israel-Hamas war, expressing concern over the deteriorating situation. They call for a quote-unquote early resolution for stability in West Asia. Xi Jinping asks Olaf Scholz to push the EU to boost fair market competition. The Chinese president and German chancellor spoke on a video call today. Beijing and the European Union are major trade partners, but the bloc has signaled a need to reduce reliance on trade with China. Ukraine reports massive Russian drone attacks on its cities. Russian drones hit civilian targets in Kharkiv. Kiev says Moscow is going after its energy infrastructure ahead of the winter. Schools shut down across Delhi as toxic smog engulfs the Indian capital. Air quality plummeted to the severe category in many parts of the city. Authorities have banned construction and entry of diesel trucks for now. And Saudi Arabia eyes a multi-billion-dollar stake in the IPL. Reports suggest that the kingdom wants to invest $5 billion in the league. This was apparently discussed during Crown Prince MBS's state visit to India last month. Today is Friday, a day of worship for Muslims, also a day of high security in Jerusalem. Israeli forces were patrolling the old city in large numbers. Their focus was on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site for Muslims. It was a tense day. Thankfully, the Friday prayers ended peacefully. But some 75 kilometers away in Gaza, there is no peace. It remains a war zone and is being reduced to rubble every day. Heavy bombardment by Israel continues. Israeli forces have surrounded the Gaza City. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting. He wants a pause in the fighting. But Israel is unrelenting. It says a ceasefire is not on the table. They're gearing up for what they call the next phase of war, a more aggressive offensive and intensified ground operations. So let's get you the latest. Starting with the Gaza City. It's the largest Palestinian city located on the Gaza Strip. It's a stronghold of the Hamas, their political and military base. And now, the top target for Israel. Remember what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. He asked his soldiers to destroy Hamas. So that is their mission now, to dismantle this group. And they're doing it ruthlessly. On their way to Gaza City, the IDF attacked a number of Hamas strongholds. They took control of them. They seized a large amount of military equipment, including grenades, explosives, and communication equipment. All of it belonged to Hamas. Gaza City is sort of the final frontier for the IDF. They've released a video. It shows their potential targets.
This is where Hamas's leaders hide, beneath homes, schools, and hospitals, while the people of Gaza involuntarily provide them with cover. Hamas must be eliminated, and there's only one way to reach them. And that's what we're doing now.
So the war is intensifying, including the narrative war. Hamas is countering the IDF with propaganda of its own. They too have released a video. It claims to show Hamas engaging with Israeli forces on the ground. Israel says Hamas is fighting back and they're carrying out what they call hit-and-run attacks. And to do this, they use their tunnels. It's also one of the biggest challenges for the Israeli forces, the Hamas tunnels. They're spread across Gaza, they're underground, and they're hard to map. They serve as the perfect hiding place for Hamas, and from these tunnels, they launch surprise attacks on Israeli troops. The IDF says it has managed to neutralize one tunnel.
הוא כאילו עובר בדיוק מתחתיך עכשיו, עברי. נכון? כן. יש צינור כזה שנכנס בדיוק מתחתיך.
אתה רוצה טרור?
לא, זה בסדר. זה מרחב של פיר, שממנו יצאו חוליה של נוח'בה, 8 מלוכלכים.
All signs point to an escalation. Today, Antony Blinken arrived in Israel. He's the US Secretary of State. He's on a difficult assignment. His job is to secure a humanitarian pause, which is not the same as a ceasefire, but it's a pause in the fighting nonetheless. His job is to convince Prime Minister Netanyahu to halt the fighting. Before he left for Israel, Blinken said he would seek, quote-unquote, concrete steps and ensure that civilians are not harmed.
It is very important that when it comes to the protection of civilians who are caught in the crossfire of Hamas's making, that everything be done to protect them and to bring assistance to those who so desperately need it.
Earlier today, Blinken met with Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders, but there's little to suggest that he will get the concessions he's asking for.
So this is a leaflet which we are sending by over 1,200,000 leaflets to the citizens of Gaza. We've carried out 6 million text messages and 4 million phone calls to the citizens of Gaza.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected the idea of a temporary ceasefire. He wants the Hamas to release the hostages first. The president spoke about self-defense. Critics say Israel is way past self-defense, and it seems to have no strategy to get the hostages out. There are more than 240 of them still in the custody of Hamas. So America has now jumped in. Reports say the US is flying drones over Gaza. These are surveillance drones. They're hovering over Gaza, hoping to catch the location of hostages. Meanwhile, Israel is also pushing ahead in what's looking like it'll be a long drawn fight. Its neighbors are nervous. Take Egypt, for instance. This week, Egypt opened its borders, the Rafah border crossing, one of the few exit points out of Gaza. Egypt had closed it after the October 7th attack on Israel, but now it's been opened, only to let foreigners and critical patients pass. Israel wants Egypt to take more refugees, and reports say they also made a lucrative offer. Israel apparently offered Egypt debt relief. It proposed to write off their debt, but it seems the proposal has been shot down. This war could displace over 2 million civilians, and Egypt does not want them. Which brings us to another key player in this game, the Hezbollah. How do you even define them? A political party / militia / Iranian proxy. And right now, Israel's biggest threat. The Hezbollah claim to have more than 100,000 fighters, well-trained, battle-hardened, and ready to fight. They are not like the Hamas or Islamic Jihad. The Hezbollah are a whole different ballgame. In the last few weeks, They have launched multiple attacks on Israel, dozens of rocket strikes, precision missiles, and artillery shelling. Israel has also been hitting back. Hezbollah says around 66 of their fighters have died. On the other side, the IDF has lost 8 men. Today, these attacks increased. The Hezbollah struck 19 locations along the border with Israel. And there was a reason for it. The Hezbollah chief made a speech today, his first speech since the Israel-Hamas war. Now, the Hezbollah is led by this man, Hassan Nasrallah. Many of his aides have given statements on this war, but he was silent throughout. Today, he broke that silence. The build-up was long, but his speech was longer, around 1.5 hours of threats, warnings, and rhetoric. Nasrallah said the October 7th attack was 100% Palestinian, meaning the Hezbollah did not know about it. He praised the Hamas terrorists who carried out this attack, but he also answered the most pressing question. Will the Hezbollah join this war? Well, Nasrallah had an interesting answer. He says the Hezbollah has already joined the war. They did it on the 8th of October. Listen to this.
Regarding our Lebanese front, as some were saying, His Eminence is going to announce joining the battle. We entered the battle on October 8th. What's happening in Gaza today is not like any other previous war. It's unlike anything that has happened before. It's not just another battle, it's a decisive and historic one. What unfolds after it will differ significantly from what it was before.
And what does that mean? It means the status quo is likely to remain. Limited Hezbollah attacks and strikes, but no full-scale war. Now, for the moment, that seems to be Nasrallah's position. Having said that, it could change in the blink of an eye. Nasrallah warned about this. He said all options are on the table with Israel. What they choose will depend on Israel's actions in Gaza. And the whole country was waiting for this. Most schools and shops had been shut. Tens of thousands gathered in Beirut. Look at the crowds. All of them had just one question. Would their country join the war? Nasrallah may have given a vague answer, but you get the drift. He's not looking for more escalation, at least not yet. The US too had a similar assessment on the situation. They said the Hezbollah would not enter this war.
See, we're concerned about continued attacks on Israeli forces there in the north, as are the Israelis. But I don't believe we've seen any indication yet specifically that Hezbollah is ready to go in full force.
The rest of Nasrallah's speech was along expected lines. America is the great Satan, Israel is lying, their soldiers will fail in Gaza, and Hamas did a great job on October 7th. Typical Hezbollah claims, nothing substantial. Yet concerns remain. And that's because of the Hezbollah's past. They're a violent and unpredictable group. Let's look a bit closely at their history. Who are they? Why do they hate Israel? And how big is their threat? The Hezbollah means Party of God. It was founded in the year 1982, the same year that Israel invaded southern Lebanon. They wanted to drive out Palestinian militants based there. But after that, Israel occupied the area, southern Lebanon. So a group of Shia clerics got together. Their goal was twofold. One, drive the Israelis out, and two, establish an Islamic state in Lebanon. The inspiration was Iran. In 1979, the revolution had brought Ruhollah Khomeini to power in Tehran. Hezbollah pledged allegiance to him. In return, Iran gave them support, all kinds of weapons, money, and training. And with that support, Hezbollah went on the offensive. They attacked Israeli military assets in the south of Lebanon. They kidnapped dozens of Western citizens. They also took part in the Lebanese civil war. You see, Lebanon has a lot of sectarian divisions. You have the Christians, you have Sunni Muslims, you have Shia Muslims, and for 15 years, all of these groups fought each other from 1975 to 1990. After its founding, the Hezbollah also joined this fight. When the war ended, the civil war, most of the militias gave up their weapons. They were disarmed, but the Hezbollah was not. In the 1990s, they joined Lebanese politics. Around 1/3 of the country was Shia Muslims, so they had popular support. It doesn't mean they abandoned their violence. The Hezbollah carried out guerrilla attacks on Israel. So in the year 2000, the IDF pulled out from Lebanon. And Hezbollah claimed it as a major victory. They called it a major victory. They said that they were the first Arab army to make Israel give up land. But that confidence soon became overconfidence. In 2006, the Hezbollah launched attacks on Israel. It was a pressure tactic. A number of Hezbollah fighters were in Israeli jails. They wanted to get them out. But the move backfired. Israel responded with an all-out war. The fighting lasted for more than 30 days. At the end of it, Hezbollah lost more than 1,000 soldiers, and Israel around 120. The attacks also changed the face of southern Lebanon. The place was reduced to rubble. Total damages were worth $2.8 billion. So the question is, will the Hezbollah risk a repeat? Because Lebanon's economy is in a really bad shape. US aircraft carriers are just off the coast, so attacking will be costly. Having said that, they do have the firepower. More than 100,000 fighters, 120,000 missiles, and pretty soon maybe air defenses too. The US says Russia's Wagner group could help Hezbollah. How? By giving them Russian SA-22 air defense systems. They can shoot down enemy jets and missiles. So the Hezbollah is mobilized and ready. All they need is a formal declaration of war. Thankfully, that did not come today. It's a political call for the Hezbollah as well. They have a cozy role in Lebanese politics right now. They call the shots, they have the best services. So why risk all of that with a war? At the same time, there will be pressure from Iran. If Tehran wants an escalation, they will turn to Hezbollah. In fact, one of their proxies has already declared war on Israel. The Houthis in Yemen, they've declared war. If Iran asks the Hezbollah to follow, will their leadership agree? I guess it's a test for them as well, to see how tight the axis of resistance really is. Vantage continues after a short break.
Well, I come out every day in the morning with my dog.
Now let's head to the Indo-Pacific. A major reset could be on the cards there, one between China and Australia. Australia's Prime Minister Antony Albanese is heading to Beijing. He'll be arriving on Saturday. It's the first visit to China by an Australian Prime Minister in 7 years. The last one was in 2016. It's also a state visit, so expect some pomp and pageantry. But beyond that, what's at stake here? Why is Albanese going to China, and that 2 days after meeting US President Joe Biden? To understand that, let's look at recent history. Australia's previous government was anti-China, and I mean visibly anti-China. In 2018, they banned Huawei from the 5G network. In 2020, they wanted to investigate China over the Wuhan virus. Canberra demanded a global investigation. They also criticized China's actions in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Now, all of this was valid. China was guilty in most of these cases. Just one problem, though. China also had a lot of leverage. I'm talking about bilateral trade. The China-Australia trade is worth around $300 billion. That's around 30% of Canberra's total trade. Meaning, 1/3 of Australia's overall trade is with China, and that gives Beijing an edge. They slabbed tariffs on Australian exports. We're talking about key industries here, like wine, beef, and coal. So Australia's exports dipped by $19 billion. Then came Antony Albanese in the year 2022, a new prime minister. He wasn't exactly pro-China, but he was expected to fix the relationship, sort of steady the ship. And that's his mission in Beijing. The Prime Minister alluded to this last week.
The relationship with China is one where the principle that I bring to it is to cooperate where we can, disagree where we must, but engage in our national interest. It is in Australia's interests as well as China, but I believe in the global interest for us to have a relationship where there is dialogue.
And is China game? Beijing says strong ties with Australia are key to regional peace. Listen in.
A healthy and stable China-Australia relationship is in the fundamental interests of the two countries and people, and is also conducive to regional and world peace and stability.
Albanese will be meeting President Xi Jinping. He will also attend a trade expo in Shanghai. Tells you where his mind is. He knows a political relationship with China is unlikely, almost impossible. So he's looking at the next best thing, a solid economic relationship. And China seems game. They've given some concessions in the last few months. Beijing promised to free a Chinese-Australian journalist. Her name is Cheng Lei. She's been in a Chinese jail for 3 years. Albanese was under a lot of pressure to get her released. Then last month, Beijing agreed. They also promised to review the tariffs, especially on wine. You see, Australia's wine exports to China were worth $1.2 billion. But the tariffs crippled them. The exports came down to just 7 million. Imagine that, from 1.2 billion to 7 million. Canberra threatened to drag China to the World Trade Organization. But now they've made a U-turn, so no case against China. I know it sounds like both sides are poised for takeoff. But it's not all rosy. China and Australia are strategic rivals. Beijing has been making inroads in the Pacific region, even signed a security pact with the Solomon Islands. And Canberra will not like that. The Pacific has been their strategic backyard. It was always the US-Australia show. Albanese says he will raise all such issues: navigation in the Indo-Pacific, tensions in the Taiwan Strait, human rights, all of it. But Xi Jinping does not respond well to appeals or lectures. So Australia's real plan is this: to expand military capabilities. This year, Canberra published a new defense review. Look at what it said, and I'm quoting: China's military buildup is occurring without transparency or reassurance to the Indo-Pacific region of China's strategic intent. So basically, Canberra is changing strategy. They're switching from defense to offense. First was the AUKUS agreement. Australia, the US and the UK decided to build nuclear submarines. Not nuclear armed, these were nuclear powered. The second is long-range missiles. Australia has signed an $800 million deal with the US. They will buy 200 Tomahawk missiles. And what is their range? More than 1,000 kilometers. If fitted on their warships, these missiles can strike China. So the ties are very precarious. China and Australia are strategic and military rivals, but their economies are closely linked. And I could say the same about most of Asia. India and China, Japan and China, ASEAN and China, South Korea and China. All of them have the same equation. And China has been betting on this, to use their economic clout to keep rivals at bay. The question is, will it work? Washington is working hard to make sure it doesn't. They've been trying to take away China's leverage to offer alternatives to China. whether it's supply chains or raw materials or market access, but so far the impact has been limited. So Joe Biden will be watching this visit closely. He must have received a brief from Albanese himself. The Australian Prime Minister visited the US last week. That too was a state visit. In fact, Albanese announced his China trip hours before heading to Washington. It tells you how tough the balance is. Biden was asked about this last week, about whether China and Australia can do business. Listen to his response.
Trust but verify is the phrase. And look, China is having their own internal and external difficulties right now. China's economic growth is stagnant compared to what it was. China has engaged in activities that Russia and many other activities that others have engaged in terms of intimidation and dealing with other countries.
Trust but verify. That's the message from Joe Biden. India too will be watching this visit closely. New Delhi has excellent ties with Australia. Both are members of the Quad. So Albanese's words and actions in Beijing will be keenly watched. Meanwhile, in Beijing, winds of change are blowing. Xi Jinping has ordered another crackdown. Doesn't sound like change, does it? But it is. This crackdown is of a different kind. The president of China is reining in the capitalists within the communists. They can no longer play monopoly with their money. Private equity investments are banned in China, and that is the big headline. If you're a member of the Communist Party, you cannot put your money in private equity funds anymore. We'll tell you why. But first, let's answer the basic question. What are private equity funds? They're private investment ventures. They operate like any other mutual fund. Investors contribute capital. The fund manager creates a pool and then decides where this money will be invested. But these private funds are not open for everyone. Usually, they're reserved for the rich. These funds have elite clients. There is a high entry barrier. In this case, it is $137,000. That should be your minimum investment. If you want to enter a high-profile private fund in China, you need at least $137,000. And where does the money go? Private funds normally invest in unlisted firms, companies that are yet to go public or list on the stock market. When capitalism boomed in China, private equity became attractive. Kids of high-ranking Chinese officials were drawn towards it. In China, they're called princelings, children of the high and mighty. And they scripted many success stories. Stories of these princelings getting involved in private equity and making tons of money. Like Liu Tianran, son of Liu He, a former vice premier of China, he founded a company called Skyus Capital. It invested in leading tech businesses, the likes of Tencent and JD.com. Then we have Alvin Jiang, grandson of Jiang Zemin, a former president of China. He set up his own private equity firm. It's called Boyu. It's based in Hong Kong. Boyu was an early investor in Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant. So how do these people make it big? What's the secret to their success? Not so much their business acumen as their political connections. And now many party officials are trying to replicate this formula. They've set up their own private funds and they're using their access to get insider information. So when their companies are listed, they make windfall profits. Now Xi Jinping is targeting these private funds. The crackdown began last year. First, top officials were asked to file reports to declare their private equity investments. If they had any relationship with the fund, they had to declare that too. And now the party has ordered a total ban. But there could be a loophole. We don't know if this ban extends to the children of party officials or to their relatives. Either way, Xi Jinping will be keeping an eye. He's shaking up the entire banking and finance industry of China. Top bankers are under investigation. As of April this year, over a dozen senior executives had been investigated in China. A rejig is underway at state-owned banks too. This year, they've cut salaries. They've also slashed perks for their staff. China's spy agency is getting involved too. It is called the Ministry of State Security. This week, they made an announcement. They released a post on Chinese social media. It called the agency, and I'm quoting, Guardians of of financial security. That's what they call the agency. Let me also quote from that post that they put out. There are not only bears and short sellers, but also naysayers and undercutters who attempt to shake international investment confidence in China and trigger domestic financial turmoil. At least they're admitting it, that there is a risk of domestic financial turmoil in China. But unleashing spies on investors is hardly the problem to this solution. Sam Bankman-Fried, once the face of cryptocurrency, he founded one of the world's biggest crypto exchanges, a $32 billion business called FTX. What's more, he was just 30 years old when he did it. The world loved him, and so did the media. They called him the crypto king. But all of that changed last December. The crypto wonder boy was arrested in the Bahamas and charged with fraud and money laundering. And now he's been found guilty. His company FTX is now bankrupt. In the world of crypto disasters, this is a story like no other. Our next report tells you all about Sam Bankman-Fried's fall from grace.
Sam Bankman-Fried started a crypto company, but he knew nothing about it. And he said this himself. He was born to two Stanford University professors. He grew up in the shadow of Silicon Valley. He was always interested in math puzzles and tried to turn that interest into a career. So he studied maths and physics at MIT. He had one goal in life, to make money quickly, and then he wanted to give away that money. It's what many call effective altruism. Sam Bankman-Fried believed in it firmly. His career began at Wall Street. The year was 2013. It was also the beginning of the crypto boom. Sam found a lot of success. He made his money through cryptocurrency arbitrage. Basically, he bought coins for a lower price and then sold them for a higher price. In 2017, Sam co-founded Alameda Research. It was a crypto hedge fund. He started making $1 million per day, but it wasn't enough for him. He wanted more, so 2 years later, he set up FTX in Hong Kong. FTX was a cryptocurrency exchange. It functioned like an unregulated bank. It allowed people to trade money for crypto like bitcoins. Those funds would stay with FTX. By 2022, FTX became a household name. Celebrities were endorsing it. There were glossy TV ads. It even gave its name to an NBA stadium. Sam Bankman-Fried himself was a celebrity. He was rubbing shoulders with the political elite. He was one of the biggest individual donors to the Biden presidential campaign. He was donating millions to charity. He was saying the right things, and according to the media, also doing the right things. But was he really? 2022 was a hard year for crypto. Sam was supposed to be the uniting factor. He was giving loans to some companies. He was bailing out crypto firms. It looked like FTX would come out of the crypto winter stronger. But then it all came crashing down. And it began with the bombshell investigation by news site CoinDesk. It said FTX was in a volatile financial situation. More reports accused it of misusing customer funds. Once that came out, all hell broke loose. Panicked customers raced to withdraw their money. Billions of dollars were pulled out of FTX. As for Sam Bankman-Fried, it's not every day that a billionaire loses everything. And he did lose everything. The crypto wonder boy's house of cards fell. He lost more money in one day than anyone ever. He was charged with fraud. He was accused of lying to investors. He was accused of stealing billions in customer funds. It was a spectacular fall from grace, one of America's biggest financial frauds. FTX went bust and filed for bankruptcy in November 2022. Sam was arrested soon after, and now he's been found guilty by a jury. He could spend the rest of his life in prison with a sentence of more than 100 years.
Sam Bankman-Fried perpetrated one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. A multi-billion-dollar scheme designed to make him the king of crypto. But here's the thing. The cryptocurrency industry might be new. The players like Sam Bankman-Fried might be new. But this kind of fraud, this kind of corruption is as old as time. And we have no patience for it.
The story of Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX is unlike any other. Yes, companies have gone bust in the world of crypto, but this fall was unique. It wasn't about volatility or risk. It was about layers of deception and walking a fine line of financial high wire. On the surface, it was a success story. A genius whiz kid transforming the world of crypto. But underneath, it was the story of a company swimming in debt, and the man running it fooling the world.
For our next story, let's begin with a graph. It really sums up the whole thing. This is the share price of WeWork. I'm sure you've heard about this company. It provides shared working spaces. In January 2021, WeWork shares were healthy. Look at the price, more than $400 per share. But since then, it's been a constant and rapid decline. Look at what it's worth today, just $1. So from $400 to $1 in just 2 years. Reports say the company is filing for bankruptcy. They haven't confirmed it yet, but rumor is it could happen next week. So the obvious question is, what happened? Why did WeWork not work? Let's look at the company's history. WeWork was founded in 2010. Their idea was quite interesting. Normally, office buildings are rented out by companies, maybe a floor, maybe the entire building, but the rented area used to be exclusive. Only that company worked there. But WeWork tried something new. They created office floors, lounges, desks, and meeting rooms. You could just pay and use them. If you want just one desk, you can get that. If you want a meeting room, same thing. The idea was to share the work area. It was supposed to attract freelancers, also companies that could not afford full-fledged offices. So for a while, it worked. WeWork was valued at $47 billion in 2019. It became a startup success story. But how did things go wrong? Well, the pandemic was one reason. Coming to office did not make sense anymore. So coming to a shared office made even less sense. People just worked from home. And that was a problem for WeWork. They had long-term leases with the building owners. The average was around 15 years. But their customers had much shorter leases. The average was 2 years. Now, do you see the problem here? WeWork had to keep paying for 15 years, but their revenue stopped after 2 years. Hence the problem. But that alone did not collapse the company. Some really bad business decisions were made, like overexpansion. Just look at how many offices they had. 777 work locations, 39 countries. All of this while bleeding money. It was a rookie mistake. WeWork saw that their business model worked in some US cities, so they thought it will work everywhere. Well, newsflash, it did not. Shared workspaces are not just about economics, it's also about work culture, about employee preferences. The company forgot that, and now they're suffering. And it's not just geographic expansion, it's also the services. WeWork diversified into other things, like WeLive, which was called a residential utopia, and Rise by We. It was supposed to be a wellness network. Those things had nothing to do with workspaces, yet the company put money into them, and the result was this, a lot of debt. Their long-term loans are worth $3 billion. Their leases are worth $13 billion. And now WeWork cannot make those payments. Hence the reports of bankruptcy. Now the leadership must take the blame here, especially this man, Adam Neumann. He was the first CEO of WeWork. People say he was a very charismatic figure. He sold the idea of WeWork to investors. Japan's SoftBank was one of them, one of the investors. They've pumped tens of billions of dollars into this company. It wasn't enough though. In 2019, WeWork tried to go public. That's when their business model was put under the microscope. And experts realized it was not sustainable. As a result, the company's valuation plummeted. I said it was worth $47 billion in 2019. By 2021, it was worth just $9 billion. And today, around $140 million. Adam Neumann got lucky though. He exited the company in 2019. Guess what his payout was? $1.7 billion. This isn't just the story of WeWork though. It's the story of many startup firms across the world. Their CEOs expand too fast. They have no patience to build something that is sustainable. And in the end, they collapse. We have one in India too. It's called Byju's. But remember one thing, when companies go bust, it's not just a headline. It's also many lives destroyed. In 2019, WeWork fired 2,400 employees. And now many more jobs are on the line. So my point is quite simple. When you start a company, you also have a responsibility to your investors, to your workers, and to the society at large. It's not just about mindless expansion plans. Companies like WeWork did not just forget the basic rule of business, they forgot the basic rule of life. You sit first and then stretch your legs. If you get that order wrong, you end up on the floor. Vantage continues after a short break.
And it's a daily ritual for me. The past few days I've been seeing the smog has got alarmingly high and it's very unhealthy. I mean, forget the pets, I can't really gauge for the pets, but for us it's really unhealthy. And I really wish it comes down as soon as possible.
Sir, your eyes are red, my eyes too are red. What would you like to say about this harmful situation and what precautions you are taking, like any suggestions?
Yeah. Well, precautions, what can I do? I have to come for a walk because of my dog. Precautions, what I take, normally I come with a mask. Today, unfortunately, I forgot my mask. I also make it a practice of having, as they say, Dadi Ma ke nuskhe. I have some good, in the morning and evening every day. And as far as possible, I try to avoid the polluting atmosphere. Be indoors, be in a car, be in a, as far as possible, a sanitized environment. That's what I can do. But really, I wish that there could be something at a more macro, a response at a more macro level. I don't want to hold the government responsible for everything, but then this is a big issue. We all know about it, Punjab, stubble, fires, etc. Something has to be done about it. What it is, I'm not an expert on this. I can't give solution, but it's alarming and it seems to be getting worse by the every year.
मैं माया शर्मा ये स्कूल जा रहा है अभी पीछे भी काफ़ी मतलब स्मोगी था ये और जल्द से बढ़ता जा रहा है तो अभी स्कूल में अभी कोई नोटिफिकेशन नहीं है सुन कि भी बॉम्बे वगैरह में तो हो गया है कि स्कूल बंद रहेंगे ऑनलाइन क्लासेस होंगी लेकिन अभी यहाँ कोई नहीं है अभी ये बच्चों को परेशानी तो होती है सांस लेने में उसमें है तो इसलिए मास्क लगा के भेज रहे हैं बच्चे को हाँ
इनका स्कूल कहाँ पर
ये अमेठी में पड़ता है यूपी में
तो क्या कहना चाहेंगे इस सिचुएशन के लिए जो हो रही है
यही है कि बच्चों के प्रिकॉशन ही लिया जाए क्योंकि बच्चे अभी जल्दी जल्दी बीमार पड़ रहे हैं अभी भी हो के हटाया था लेकिन स्कूल के एग्जाम्स वगैरह चलते तो भेजना ही पड़ता है
क्योंकि बेटे ने बहुत जागरूकता का काम किया
इसीलिए
तो आप और क्या कहना चाहेंगे बतौर एक मदर भी बतौर एक नागरिक भी और जो आंखों में जलन वगैरह है इसको लेकर क्या फेस कर रहे हैं वो भी सब बता दीजिए
अभी आंखों में तो अभी इतनी जलन नहीं है लेकिन हाँ ये सांस लेने में थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम होती है आंखों में आगे ऐसे धुआं सा आ जाता है सुबह सुबह तो इसलिए अब बच्चे को है कि भाई हो जाए ऑनलाइन क्लासेस बच्चे बीमार ना पड़े तो ये अच्छा रहेगा
Now let's turn from a failure to a success story. one that heralds a bright future. The US has finally got its first female Navy chief, Admiral Lisa Franchetti. She has finally been confirmed as the US Chief of Naval Operations. It also makes her the first female member of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's the top military advisory body in America. She has broken the military's almost bulletproof glass ceiling. And she will serve as an example to women everywhere. The road to the top for Franchetti was complicated. Lately, more because of the politics than blatant sexism. But she finally got the top job yesterday. Our next report looks at her journey and the state of women in the armed forces.
This is Admiral Lisa Franchetti, America's new Chief of Naval Staff, who was appointed just yesterday. Admiral Franchetti has served in the US Navy for 38 years and has held multiple commands over the years. Before becoming Naval Chief, she was the Vice Chief for over a year. Before that, she was the head of the US 6th Fleet, the fleet that looks after America's European and African operations and is headquartered in the city of Naples. The Admiral has also led US naval forces in Korea and commanded American aircraft carriers. So she clearly knows everything there is to know about the US Navy. But her appointment to the top post was on hold. US President Joe Biden nominated her in August. Since then, she's been serving as acting naval chief. The official confirmation from the US Senate came only this week. What was the holdout? A Republican Party senator. He was blocking hundreds of promotions, and his reason was patriarchal, but not in the way you might think. The senator was stalling military promotions to push an agenda against abortion. He wants the US military to scrap a policy where they pay for service members who travel for abortion. He wanted it scrapped. And in this way, the need to control a woman's body ended up delaying the appointment of America's first woman naval chief. Talk about killing two birds with one regressive stone. But this senator was defeated yesterday. His fellow Republicans overruled him and finally let Admiral Franchetti take command. It marks the first time a woman is a member of America's Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's a group of the 6 heads of US military services. And there's a chairperson and vice chairperson. So it's an elite 8-member body that advises all military decisions in the US. And it now has a woman as a full member. The head of the US Coast Guard is a non-member attendee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff meetings. And this post too is held by a woman, Admiral Linda Lee Fagan. Biden appointed her to the post last June. At that time, it was unprecedented. But Admiral Franchetti's appointment goes one step further for women in the military. She joins a select group of women who lead military branches in their nations. There was Slovenian Major General Alenka Ermench, who became the country's army chief in 2018. She then went on to become NATO's chief of defense. In Jamaica, you have Rear Admiral Antoinette Wemyss-Gorman. She's the country's chief of defense staff. But these women are the exceptions. Around the world, military service is still seen as a man's profession. Most countries didn't allow women to officially join the military till the 1940s, and even then, it was mostly as medical professionals. Over time, things have gotten better. Some countries even have women serving in combat roles, but that's not the case everywhere. Like in India, where women are just being allowed to take up historically male assignments. In January, Captain Shiva Chauhan became the first woman to be deployed to India's Siachen Glacier. It's a sensitive border region near India's de facto border with Pakistan. Then, there's the Indian Air Force's Group Captain Shaliza Dhami. She became the first Indian woman to be given command of a frontline combat unit. This was in March. These are small but important steps, and we have a long way to go when it comes to having women in the forces, because people tend to forget that women have always been on the front lines. India itself has numerous examples, from the Maratha queen Ahilyabai Holkar, who fought rebels on the battlefield, to the Rani of Jhansi Lakshmibai, who fought the British, and then the members of the platoon that bore her name, the Rani of Jhansi Regiment in Subhash Chandra Bose's Indian National Army or Azad Hind Fauj. Women have always fought in times of war in India and the world over. Admiral Lisa Franchetti is one of the few who are getting their due recognition, and it's something the rest of the world can learn from.
Have you read The Monkey's Paw? It's a parable, a horrifying one. If you haven't read it, the premise is quite simple. Whoever owns the monkey's paw is granted 3 wishes. They all come true, but at an enormous price, almost hellish consequences. Now, this is just a children's story, but now real-life monkey's paw is taking shape. I'm talking about weight loss drugs, specifically the injections manufactured by Novo Nordisk. You'll see why. Novo Nordisk is a Danish healthcare company worth over $400 billion. Today, it is Europe's most valuable company, thanks to 2 drugs. Wegovy, which is a weight loss drug, it's currently available in Europe and America, and Ozempic. It treats type 2 diabetes, but it's widely used for weight loss too. It is approved in Europe, America, Canada, Japan, China, and Australia. In the past year, these drugs have become household names. For starters, they have a lot of takers. In 2020, 2.6 billion people worldwide were overweight or obese. That's 38% of the global population. By 2025, more than half the world's population will be overweight or obese. That's more than 4 billion people overweight. But many don't use these drugs for medical reasons. They use them for cosmetic purposes. Influencers and celebrities swear by these weight loss jabs, like tech mogul Elon Musk, and former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, even actor Amy Schumer. Celebs have heavily endorsed these drugs. The hype is real, so much so that there are global shortages. So this gold rush for weight loss drugs has birthed a lucrative black market. Pharmacies are getting fake ingredients of the drugs, they're mixing them up and then selling them to the patients. Some pharmacies are directly calling beauty salons to trap customers looking to shed a few kilos. Where there's a problem, it seems social media has a role to play. Influencers are promoting and selling fake drugs on Instagram, but these fakes come with real-world consequences. As the demand surges, so do trips to hospitals. In July, a woman in Scotland injected a fake weight loss drug, a fake weight loss jab. She woke up paralyzed. Last month, after using fake Ozempic drugs, a number of people in Austria had life-threatening seizures. Just this year, Austria, Germany, the UK, Belgium and Australia seized counterfeit weight loss drugs. So what are their governments doing about it? They've opened investigations, but the black market remains unregulated. And what does Novo Nordisk have to say about this? It says, and I'm quoting, falsified Ozempic pens should not be used. Quite the solution, we say. It also says one can know the difference between real and fake drugs by using a scale indicator and a dose selector. That's helpful. But let me ask you this. Do you know what these devices are? Do you have a scale indicator at home? How about a dose selector? This argument is in bad faith. Leave alone counterfeits. How safe are real Ozempic and Wegovy medicines? Just look at the side effects. Diarrhea, constipation, hair loss, bleeding, blistering. Side effects of suicidal thoughts are also being investigated. Novo Nordisk says there aren't enough details to determine what happened. These are their words, not enough details. Again, a lukewarm response. But then again, what do you expect? This company is getting rich despite people suffering from suicidal thoughts. In the past 5 years, their share price has more than quadrupled. Sales of Ozempic and Wegovy are soaring from $16 billion last year to $21 billion this year. So where has the blame shifted? On the buyers. But you see, many people don't really have an option. For obese patients, science does not have many answers. Obese patients can choose from 4 types of treatments: a healthy diet and exercise, which do not guarantee results. Then there is surgery, which is a worst case scenario. The 4th option is a weight loss drug. There are many kinds, but Wegovy and Ozempic give the best results so far. So it's a catch-22 situation. Let alone the dearth of treatments, scientists do not even know what causes obesity. Every few years, they butt their heads. Each time, there is no consensus. But doctors do agree on one thing. Obesity is not a personal responsibility issue. It is not the result of personal choice. Neither is the decision to go for weight loss jabs. This is a societal challenge, a product of policy failure. It has bred a monkey's paw that hovers over this epidemic of obesity. And until we see it that way, magic hacks and bad policies will continue to haunt us. Now let's talk about the end of an era. An era many assumed had already ended with the death of John Lennon in December 1980 and again with the death of George Harrison in 2001. We're talking about the legendary band from Liverpool, England, the Beatles. The Beatles changed the world with their music. They redefined rock and blues from the 1960s onwards. And they've left an enviable legacy. But it seems they weren't done. Yesterday, the Beatles released their last ever song. It's called Now and Then, a track written and sung by John Lennon in 1978. Singing we can hear today thanks to the power of artificial intelligence. George Harrison is on the ghostly guitar, and the two living Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, on the bass and drums. Half the song is from today, the other half is a blast from the past.